Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of Deep True Crime, where we dive deep into past cases and many times current cases. Dive deep and see what happened in that particular case, in that particular story. Because at the end of the day, we know that people are capable of some of the worst acts known to man. And so with that being said, you got to be careful of the people you let in your life and the people around you. You never want to sleep on that. Sure, there are some trusting people. Problem is, we don't know those trusting people, do we? And so we never know who we're going to come across. And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you one of the most heinous crimes known to man. One of the most notorious serial killers ever. And this is the story of Samuel Little. And with that story, you would wonder, what serial killers have done the worst things known to man? You've heard of Jeffrey Dahmer. You've heard of all these different people, right? When you think of some of the worst serial killers of all time, you quickly think of Ted Bundy. You think of John Wayne Gacy. You think of some of the worst like Jeffrey Dahmer. And when you think about these numbers, these are some terrible, terrible numbers. You got 33 victims or more. You got 30 confessed, 20 confirmed from Ted Bundy. You got 17 victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. But they have nothing on the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history who got away with his murders for almost 50 years. And that's what we're going to be sharing with you today, is the notorious, the most prolific serial killer of all time, Samuel Little. And Samuel Little, also known as Samuel McDowell, he went on a major crime spree over a 50-year span. You see, Samuel Little died on December 30th at the age of 80 years old in California while serving 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole and suffering from diabetes and heart problems. Samuel Little was an American serial killer who confessed to murdering 93 people, and most of them were women. He was convicted in 2014 for the murders of Carol Ilene Elford, Guadalupe Apodaca, and Audrey Nelson Everett. In 2018, he was convicted for the murder of Denise Christie Brothers. And that's one of the reasons that makes him such one of the most heinous serial killers of all time. And that's exactly why we are diving into this story today. You see, the FBI has confirmed that Samuel Little, that his involvement in at least, they have been able to confirm his involvement in at least 60 of the 93 confessed murders. Again, the largest number of cases for any serial killer in U.S. history. Little murdered women across 19 states over 35 years, ending around 2005. 5 years after analysts with the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program began linking cases to convicted murderer Samuel Little, and nearly 18 months after a Texas Ranger began to get breathtaking number of confessions, the FBI has confirmed Little to be the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. This is unheard of. crime bosses probably have this much, but they don't do this crime themselves, right? But this guy confessed to 93. Now 60 are actually confirmed. So even if that number 93 is not accurate, there's a good chance it's over 60. Maybe a little less than 93. But he had such a memory when he started confessing to all of these heinous crimes that he is definitely guilty of. And that's exactly why we are sharing this, because it's unheard of that this could even possibly happen. But truth is, this happens. And that's why we have to be extremely careful with all of those things that go on out there. Samuel Little was interviewed extensively by Texas Ranger James Holland from between the time of June of 2018 to shortly before his death in December of 2020. Not very long ago. Not very long ago at all. And during the course of these interviews, he confessed to committing 93 murders between 1970 and 2005. More than 60 of his confessions have been definitively matched to the victims through DNA evidence and extensively corroborated interviews. They did their due diligence in figuring this out. Because obviously some people just want fame and they'll say lies to get that fame. But in this case, it's actually been backed up that a lot of what he was confessing to was actually true. You see, he had a photographic memory and was able to describe where he met and killed the victims, where he left their bodies, and what the victims looked like. Little, he did lack the ability to accurately judge the time frames and the distance from where he says it happened to where they were actually found. So there was a little like where that added a little discrepancy during many times. So who is this Samuel Little? Well, he was born Samuel McDowell on June 7th of 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia, to a mother he claimed was a teenage prostitute. Now, authorities do believe that she may have given birth to him while she was in jail. And as a prostitute, that may have led to why he did a lot of this. Soon after his birth, Little's family, they moved to Lorain, Ohio, where he was raised mostly by his grandmother. He attended Hawthorne Junior High School, where he had problems with discipline and achieving much at the school. By his own account, he began having sexual fantasies as a child about strangling women. And this all started when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. And as a teenager, he started even collecting true crime magazines depicting women being choked. Look at that at a very young age. And this is where you have to ask, is it because of this upbringing that leads to this? Was this in him already? We don't know these answers. But being born in jail, if that's accurate, being born to a teenage prostitute, if that's accurate, that could definitely lead to a lot of problems. It could lead to a lot of problems. Not everyone has the strength to fix that, right? That stuff takes time. And so he's been interviewed extensively about his past and what has led to a lot of this problem. And so this is where it's like, let's learn a little more about him. You see, in 1956, after being convicted of breaking and entering into property in Omaha, Nebraska, Little was held in an institution for juvenile offenders And from then on, his crimes just got worse. And Samuel Little, he moved to Florida to live with his mother in the late 1960s, and he would work at various times as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant. He said he then began traveling more widely and had more run-ins with the law, being arrested in 8 states for crimes that included driving under the influence, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and rape. Little claimed that he took up boxing during his stints in prison, referring to himself as a former prize fighter. And in 1961, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking into a furniture store in Lorain, Ohio, and he was released in 1964. Excuse me. But by 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes including theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials. You see, this guy was an angry guy. This guy, he really, it seemed like until 2005, he couldn't control himself. Because that seems to be the last time that anything occurred about when it came to him killing people. Even his stories, nothing happened after 2005. And he's arrested, I think, in 2012, and we'll learn a little more about that right now. But this is where it's like, okay, and what else did this crazy guy do, right? In 1982, he was arrested in Mississippi and charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose LaPree, who had gone missing in September of that year. Now, a grand jury, they actually declined to indict him for this murder at that time. And this is where it's like, okay, they had some evidence, but he was able to beat that for the time being. And, however, while he was under investigation, Little was extradited to Florida and tried for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body was found in 1982. And prosecution witnesses identified Little in court as a person who spent time with Mount on the night she disappeared. On the night of her disappearance, he was seen with her. And the problem was that due to mistrust of witness testimonies, Little was acquitted in January of 1984. After that, he moves to California, where he stayed in the vicinity of San Diego. And would his crime be done after that? No, he wasn't done for another decade or so. In October of 84, he was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Laurie Barros, who did survive his attack. 1 month later, he was found by police in the back seat of his car with an unconscious woman, also beaten and strangled, in the same location as the attempted murder was of Barros. Little did serve 2.5 years in prison for both crimes, and he was let out. I mean, back then, I don't know, maybe they were just a little more lenient, that they only gave him 2.5 years. And after his release in February of 87, he immediately moved to Los Angeles and committed at least 10 additional. And then on September 5th of 2012, he was arrested at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and then extradited to California to face a narcotics charge, after which authorities then used DNA testing to establish that he was involved in the murders of Carol Ilene Elford, who was killed on July 13th of 1987, Guadalupe Apodaca, killed on September 3rd of 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, who was killed on August 14th of 1989. All three women were killed and later found on the streets of Los Angeles. And the police, the LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, they gave him the name the choke and stroke killer, since he often did the master stuff while strangling his victims. He was extradited to Los Angeles, where he was charged on January 7th of 2013. A few months later, the police said that Little was being investigated for involvement in 36 murders committed in the 1980s, which until then had been undisclosed. No one knew about that. And in connection with the new circumstances in Mississippi, the LaPree murder case was reopened, the one we talked about a little earlier. In total, Little was tested for involvement in 93 murders of women committed in many U.S. states. He was tried for the murders of Elford, Nelson, and Apodaca in September of 2014. The prosecution presented the DNA evidence as well as testimony of witnesses who were attacked by the accused at different times throughout his criminal career. And on September 25th of 2014, Little was found guilty and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Little continued to insist on his innocence. He said he was innocent. He kept saying he is innocent of this crime. Before his death, Little was serving a sentence at the California State Prison in Los Angeles County. But later, he would confess to so much more. On November 9th of 2018, he confessed to the 1996 fatal strangulation of Melissa Thomas, who you're looking at on the screen. Although his memory of dates and what his victims were wearing at the time of their murders, that was a little off and it wasn't entirely accurate, but he seemed to have maintained an acute memory regarding other details about Melissa. He remembers where he was and what car he was in. He draws pictures of many of the women he killed. They gave him tools so that he can start creating this, like crayons and drawing and art and paper, so that he can start creating drawings of all the victims that of the 93 that he can think of. Everyone's picture, where their name, if he could remember. A lot of times he didn't, so there is Jane Doe's out there, and we'll talk about that a little later. But in 2018, while Little was being held in California prison, that's when Texas Ranger James Holland visited him in hopes of, finding out about a murdered prostitute named Denise Brothers, who was killed in Odessa, Texas. And as you can see, this is Denise Brothers that you're looking at on the screen. Now, Samuel Little, he did end up confessing to the murder and many more in exchange to be transferred out of LA County Prison. And learning that Little had a talent for drawing, that's when Holland provided him with art supplies so that he can illustrate his victims. Since then, Samuel Little has produced impressively accurate portraits of his victims, which the FBI is currently using in hopes of solving several dozen cold cases. And a lot of these portraits that you see up here are of unsolved murders. And that's where we're hoping that we can bring more of this to justice. Because they have only confirmed 60 of the 93. Since then, Little has produced impressively accurate portraits of his victims, as you can see right here. Using, which is what the FBI is currently using in hopes of solving several dozen cold cases. As I probably am repeating that a little. My apologies. But on November 13th of 2018, Little was charged with the murder of Denise Brothers in Odessa, Texas. That's who we were just talking about. After he confessed, they went and indicted him on that, and he was charged with it after confessing to Texas Ranger Holland. He pleaded guilty to the murders of brothers on December 13th and received another life sentence. And the Texas District Attorney and Wise County back then, they announced on November 13th that Little had confessed to dozens of murders and may have committed more than 90 across 14 states between 1970 and 1975. And so this is where it's like, this is one heinous dude all the way through. And as you just saw, the FBI shows the map of locations where he killed young women according to a lot of what he was confessing. And so on November 15th of 2018, the Russell County, Alabama District Attorney announced that he had earlier in the month confessed to the 1979 murders of 23-year-old Brenda Alexander. Now, her body was found in Phoenix, City, Alabama. Spelled different than Phoenix, Arizona. There's no O. On November 16th, in Macon, Georgia of 2018, the Macon, Georgia sheriffs announced that Little had credibly confessed to the 1977 strangling murder of an unidentified woman and the 1982 strangling murder of 18-year-old Fredonia Smith. And in the fall of 2018, he confessed to the 1982 murder of 55-year-old Dorothy Richards and 96 murder of 40-year-old Daisy McGuire. Both of their bodies were found in Houma, Louisiana. And on November 19th of 2018, Sheriff Troy Peterson said that Little had confessed to strangling 36-year-old Julia Critchfield in Gulfport area in 1978 and dumping her body off a cliff. And on November 20th of 2018, law enforcement officials announced that Little had admitted to more killings, to 46-year-old Nancy Carol Stevens in Tupelo, Mississippi in 2005, and that the case would be presented to a grand jury in January of 2019. Now remember, he dies in 2020. And so maybe he's feeling it and it's time to just get everything off his chest, right? And so he confessed. He continued to confess. November 21st, 2018, confessed to murdering 19-year-old Evelyn Weston. Her body was found near Fort Jackson, South Carolina. He confessed to having killed 20-year-old Rosie Hill in Marion County, Florida in 1982. This is what I mean. This guy was one of the worst you could ever come across. This is why he is the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history. This guy is like he never took a day off of this. And on November 27th of 2018, the FBI announced that a violent criminal apprehension program team had confirmed 34 of Little's confessions and was working to match the remainder of Little's confessions to known murders or suspicious death. Because some people were said to have died of suspicious death. Come to find out, they actually died by a serial killer and was choked out or of asphyxiation. And so Little began making the confessions in exchange for a transfer out of the LA County prison in which he was being held. And one included his confession to a previous cold case homicide, previously one of only 2 homicide cases in that county of Prince George's with unidentified victims. And so they were able to match it. And so this is where it's like, my gosh, did you slow down? Because in December 2018, he was indicted again for strangling Linda Sue Boards, who was only 23 years old, to death in May of 1981. Her body was found on May 15th of 1981. And one of Little's victims was identified in December 2018 as Martha Cunningham of Knox County, Tennessee. Martha was only 34 years old when she was murdered. And on May 31st of 2019, Cuyahoga County, the prosecutors announced more indictments with 4 counts of aggravated murder and 6 counts of kidnapping. And that accused Little of killing Mary Jo Payton in 84 and Rose Evans in 91. Both victims were strangled and dumped. And the body of Rose Evans was found on August 24th of 91. So as you can see, I mean, he killed so many people. Rest in peace to all of his victims. This guy does not belong. Oh my God, it's too bad that when he was this little criminal, he didn't serve more time. We might have some more women in this area, because now we have all these unsolved murders as well. And he confesses to killing multiple women, but some of this we also have to try to identify. And we even have some Jane Does that still need to be identified that he did confess to. But, unfortunately, it's hard, don't really know. Don't know how to get a hold of the family and all of them. So you have all these sketches of what he has done to all these women. Rest in peace to all of the women that he has killed or hurt. It's just so sad. Like, who would have thought someone was so capable of any of it? Like, I know I do these all the time. Maybe I should be used to this, but I'm not. And so there's still a lot of unmatched murders between 1970 and 1997. If you have any information you believe will help investigators solve any of them, contact the Texas Rangers at rangers@dps.texas.gov or 512-424-2160. And as always, you can always call 1-800-CALL-FBI. Or if you want to submit any tips, go to tips.fbi.gov. My friends, if this sounds like the type of stories you like to hear, please smash that subscribe button, click on that like, and hit that notification bell. I'm Manny Rodriguez. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hope you got some enjoyment and you've learned a little of some of the heinous things that we as humans have to be careful of around us. You never know. Don't be so trusting. Humans start by gaining your trust. Be careful, my friends. I'm Manny Rodriguez with Deep True Crime, and I look forward to serving you again. Peace. Have a great day.